Welcome back, YouTube. Renaissance is back with G and J. Sorry it's been a while, but we've been in that proverbial lab of life, so to say. And we know that game takes no prisoners. But we're happy to be back, and today is as good a day as any to come back, as our favorite sport of boxing has now regained its prominence with COVID dying down and everything. And the word is the guy on top of the game is WBA, WBC, and WBO super middleweight champion Saul Canelo Alvarez. Jay and myself will be reviewing his accomplishments and trajectory, determine if that is all cap or fact. Now, before Jay goes on about him, he's currently only 30 years old. He has 56 wins already, 56 wins, which is not an anomaly with the Mexican tradition of fighting. And he only has one loss. And we'll go over that loss here in detail in a moment. But he also has two draws, if you look at his record. And we want to give a disclaimer to one of them because the kid went pro at 15 years old. Again, not traditional here in the States, but it is traditional down in the Latin countries. So again, that's a disclaimer. But Jay, can you please fill in the blanks, give the audience a brief history on Canelo Alvarez's fight history?
So, like Greg was saying, Canelo Alvarez turned pro at 15. So, with that being said, and with Tijuana being the stereotypical place for a lot of young fighters to go and develop themselves early, since that's one of the only places where you can be 15 and start your career, you would expect there to be some low competition, or what we like to call cab drivers. No disrespect, but that's what the reputation is.
Real
So,
cab driver. Not you, but y'all cab drivers. Don't take that.
keep that on your mind. But with that being said, a lot of those beginning names you are not going to recognize. I'm not even going to address some of these. I recognize some of them, but let's just not even go there. So the first recognizable name for the people that are actually boxing fans, not the casual fans, but boxing fans, would be Carlos Manuel Baldomir. Now, mainly because he also fought Floyd Mayweather Jr., and they both had on interesting outfits. So there was eye popping. Floyd had on like some pink and cream outfit and beat the brakes off of him. Now, not a lot of detail with that outside of Baltimore just getting a belt in some weird type of way. And he had an interesting name, especially as a Latin man, Baltimore. Right. We'd never heard that before. So it's stuck in our mind. Mm-hmm. Moving right on past that, the next name, famous kind of from obscurity as well, would be Matthew Hatton, the brother of Ricky Hatton, who was a welterweight champion who also fought Floyd Mayweather. Now, Matthew Hatton never had a reputation at 154 pounds, never held a belt at 154 pounds. Matter of fact, I don't even think he was in the top 10 at 147 or 140 at that particular time. So it's funny that that's what was the qualifier against Canelo. And that was
I don't know if he was top 10 of people that wore gloves. I don't know where he came. Yeah.
Ever at no point in time. So let's breeze on past that. If you want to look him up, look him up. No shade. It's just, it is what it is. Right. Next on this list, who would be, I would say, is actually more famous than the last two people that we knew or listed because of his space on network television, back on a show called The Contender, which is Alfonso Gomez. Now, Alfonso Gomez had a decent beginning career, stereotypical Mexican fighter, but a little bit more flair to himself. I would say his most notable fight, especially early on, was against Ishii Smith, who's also a notable fighter. I believe he just retired, and who's also connected to Floyd Mayweather Jr. So moving down this list, for those fans of the 90s, the 2000s, you know, the classic boxing, we gotta represent for Kermit Cintron, another good fighter. I wouldn't necessarily say great, but definitely at least a B-level fighter.
He was notable, if you recall, he was notable for having two fights against Margarito.
Right.
Margarito, and he was trained by the late great Emmanuel Stewart. So he had the jab game, he had the right hand game. He was taller and longer for the division, but he did lose twice against Margarito.
Yeah. And you know, when you got a little bit of chin issues, that's not going to work with Emmanuel Stewart style. Yeah. That's not going to work. So next on this list, and actually a legendary name, definitely a first ballot Hall of Famer, and famous for the 90s, is welterweight sensation, lightweight sensation, Shane Mosley. All right. So this is definitely later in Shane Mosley's career, but everybody knows Shane's name from the 90s to now. So we'll just kind of let that speak for itself. Next on this particular list is Josecito Lopez. Now, this guy was supposed to take over. Honestly, it was supposed to be Canelo and him as far as where, who was at the top of Mexican boxing and be in different weight classes. But that chin started being an issue. Then you had younger guys like Abner Mares and other younger guys come in and take that spotlight. So, Josecito kind of fell to the wayside, especially with a couple signature losses. Now, beyond that, or chronologically beyond that, we also have Austin Trout. Now, I was kind of a fan of Austin Trout with him being a southpaw fighter, with me being a southpaw myself, and how tricky and crafty he is. But I always found it funny, the disconnect between his boxing intellect and what his body was able to athletically accomplish. Right. You could always see that there was either a timing issue or it just wasn't fluid enough for it to make it happen. So he got hit more than he needed to, especially against Canelo. So let's move on past that. Now, we come to that one loss, the creme de la creme, the boxer's boxer, your favorite boxer's boxer, Floyd Mayweather Jr. Now, since me and Greg are both fans of Mayweather, I would go as far as to say he's our favorite fighter, but Greg's a little bit more detailed in this area. So I'm going to toss it back over to him, and we're going to see what he thought of that particular matchup or what led into that matchmaking.
Yeah, I was thinking I was thinking about something that crossed my mind when you were talking, that what didn't cross my mind when we were doing research is that most of these guys were welterweights. Again, guys, when we're talking about Canelo's career at this point, when he fought Mayweather, this is at 154. This is a weight class above welterweight. Welterweight is 147. Kermit Cintron, Carlos Baldomir, Shane Mosley, Josecito Lopez, Floyd Mayweather, and a lot of other fighters, Matthew Hatton, a lot of other fighters came up to fight Canelo Alvarez. That's one thing. But that's not abnormal when you're bringing up a fighter, you're grooming a fighter. You don't want to expose them to the full level of, of competition that they'll be facing when they are prime time or when they're a big deal. You want those fighters to have a good area or something they've mastered so your fighter can get into that style, but without too much of a danger in other areas so they don't lose. You don't want to expose them too much. You want to give them a chance to experience these different styles so they can put this all together by time they fight that numero uno or that first big fight, which brings us to Floyd Mayweather. Floyd Mayweather moved up. I think he won belts about 5 weight classes, but he was about 36 years old when he fought Canelo. Nothing against Canelo and nothing against Floyd. If you're 36 years old and you're fighting a guy as slick, as powerful, as knowledgeable, as well timed, well schooled as Canelo at a weight class above you, who's knocking out people that you couldn't knock out at 36 years old, that's a challenge. Now I will say this, again, we are both knowledgeable about Floyd, and if he's going to be the boxer's boxer, one of the best all time, we're not really thinking this fight is going to be 50-50. I had it going in maybe 60-40. Again, because of the guy's age, his ability, his youth, all of that. We go into the fight, the promotion was great, done by Golden Boy Promotions, even though Oscar was doing all types of crazy stuff that we know about, and we'll do another video on. He was doing all these crazy things, but it was promoted great. And as Floyd or any great fighter will tell you that's knowledgeable, when you put Black Americans, because you can do a lot of combinations of Black, maybe Black European or African, but when we talk about when you put Black Americans, slick fighters, well schooled against Latinos, specifically Mexicans, you're gonna get a big bill. People gonna buy that fight on pay-per-view if both of the names are big, and that was the case in this. So we go in that fight, and this young guy's name was so big that one of the judges gave Canelo a draw, although Floyd wiped most of those rounds. So that's how big his name was. He does get credit for the loss. We're going to put that on his resume. I don't care how young he was. Floyd, Sugar Ray Leonard, a lot of people fought some of their hardest competition early in their career, whether it was a veteran or whether it was someone their age that had a similar level of skill or greater. So you do get, that point or that deduction for taking that loss. But he did learn a lot going into the rest of his career. And Jay, you can go into the rest of his career now.
Now, he did learn a lot, but it's funny how hard the drop off was from that apex
Mm,
of Mayweather.
mm.
So going from the tippy top, next, the very next one in chronological order is actually Alfredo Angulo.
Oh,
Now, going from the person that gets hit the least in history, Alfredo Angulo might be the person that gets hit the most outside of James Kirkland that I have ever seen.
that's
That I
the
have ever seen.
right.
So I mean, but you know what? After the mind screw of having Mayweather completely destroy you in a boxing manner rather than just beating you up,
Right.
this was the proper tune-up for him to gain a ridiculous amount of confidence and see how he could build on it.
Right.
And I believe that he did with the next step up, which was Erislandy Lara, who was in the prime of his prime, or in the middle of his prime. Um, Boxing sharpness, speed, footwork, IQ, had everything except for, I would say, dynamite power, but he definitely had a good amount of power. Now, a lot of people think Erislandy Lara won this fight. I would say a lot more people think that this was actually a draw. But of course, your stereotypical Canelo fan is going to say, they're going to give it to Canelo. Now, to be honest with you, I haven't watched this fight in a while, so I can't really put my hat on either side. But I dare say that it would be, to be fair to both parties, it would probably be a draw. So moving on, the man that we were just talking about, who gets hit just as much as Alfredo Angulo, James Kirkland. This was the worst matchup that I've probably ever seen. Like, I'm surprised James Kirkland didn't die, and I'm surprised that we saw him in the ring after this.
Right.
This was a massacre,
Right.
absolute massacre. Moving past that to get to some legendary names, and here's is actually the best pocket of Canelo's career. And I'm not going to get into a lot of detail, but we're going to kind of
Right.
bullet point. So next on this list, immediately after James Kirkland, was the legendary Puerto Rican fighter Miguel Cotto.
Mhm.
Body punching machine, legendary guy, nice guy, very likable fighter internationally. I mean, even when I've taken women to fights that didn't know fighters, to be honest, he's an attractive guy, so they kind of latch to him. And so that's what happens.
Light
So
skinned
we got,
dude from Puerto Rico to speak Spanish, bro. They on it.
yeah,
Yeah.
with African features. Come on, man. Got big lip, big nose, whatever. So, so next on this list, I would say probably one of the most famous UK fighters of all time, and one of the most shattering chins that we've ever seen in the history of boxing, Amir Khan. But
Fragile.
here's the thing. Here's the thing. I
Mr.
really
Glass.
don't want to. Yeah, that's Mr. Glass for real. I don't want to sound like I'm hating because I am a fan of his athletic ability. It's just that he wastes so much of his potential just by not having a second gear in his
Right.
thought process.
Right.
The boy's simple. The boy's simple. He need help. But anyway, moving past that, man, we got Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. You know what? I'm
You
gonna
know
just
what?
leave that right
You
there.
know what? Yeah, let's do that because look, y'all. There is I don't know. It's the summit of cab drivers. He definitely got in the meeting with some people in high places to arrange this summit of nothing but trash. So we ain't even gonna comment on them until we get to this European tour specifically. So yeah, don't even mention none of these bum daddies until we get to the European tour. Just
Yeah,
whoever
yeah,
is next after the bum
the,
daddy.
the fighter previously named was the president of the coalition, the cab drivers.
Right.
So we gonna leave him to the side for now.
Right.
Now here begins the European tour, which was the second leg of the more entertaining section of Canelo's career, or how can I say this? The highlight of his career,
Mm-hmm.
because Amir Khan was a hell of a knockout. Liam Smith was a nice knockout. And next on this list is Triple G, Gennady Golovkin. Now, in my personal opinion, both of these fights lacked what they could have been as far as how they promoted it and the firepower that we know both of those fighters possess. But then again, A level or S level fighters got to be judicial. They got to be smart. It's got to be a chess game. So I do respect the game.
Right.
It's just, man, this could have been one of them ones. But
Right.
nobody that's not in love with boxing like we love boxing is even going to remember this fight, to be honest.
Right.
So running past that, Rocky Fielding, we're gonna brush you to the side because don't nobody know you, boy. Daniel Jacobs, sad because I was a fan of Daniel Jacobs with him being a Brooklyn boy. I wanted to root for America, but just like Austin Trout, that body, mind, intellect connection never really clicked as sharp as it was supposed to be. So we're gonna leave that where it is. Now, next on the list on this European tour would be Sergey Kovalev. Now, very talented fighter, but definitely was at the end of his career. Definitely had alcohol and drug problems and legal problems and sexual misconduct problems by this particular time. So if somebody could be at their worst or at their mental weakest, I would say that's where Sergey Kovalev was, because that effort was, that wasn't Sergey in there. We didn't recognize that fighter in the ring at all. So
some of this, so there's some European fighters in this list of cab drivers, and we call this list the European Coalition of Bum Daddies or Summit of Misfortunate Cab Drivers, whatever you want to call it. The dudes is not here to win no fights. They're not. And I don't want to mix in the Eastern Europeans from countries close or associated with Russia because they have a more refined like skill set. And I also want to point out that he's moving up in weight now. He started at 154. He moved up to 160 when he fought Miguel Cotto in Triple G. And he moved over 168, or maybe he had one fight against one of these European bum daddies. Rocky Fielding, probably, at 168. But he fought Sergey Kovalev at 175. This kid is like 5'8". And he gave him a stanky leg, even though that's not in. So it's probably one of them African dances where they be moving the legs out. He gave him one of those. He gave him one of those. And yes, there's a lot of disclaimers, like Jay said. But you shouldn't be 5'8", moving to 160, doing the little, what I'm saying, the African joints with the legs. So we're like, all right. You're knocking out people 175 pounds. So it must be time to catch the dudes that we did not mention. Jay, can you please give me a list of some fighters we didn't mention that was on the top of their game that Canelo didn't fight?
So we would be remiss if we did not mention, well, until last week, Billy Joe Saunders was at the top of that list.
He was one of the people.
He was at the top of that list. Boo Boo Andrade was at the top of that list still, and he's still calling him out to this day, just as vigorous as he did as the first day.
Yes.
Jermell and Jamal Charlo. That I cannot let you slide on that, bro. Two of the most thoroughbreds that have ever been in this division, and you ain't said their name not one time. I don't like that. I don't like that at all, my brother.
Smoke champions, smoke thoroughbreds.
Then even on the low end, we got J Rock that you could have been for.
Oh, Julian Williams.
On the low end. He got a chin you could check, but he also got some IQ that you might not be able to outbox. So
Benavidez. Is it Jose Benavidez? Who's the Benavidez at these weight classes? 168. Or David Benavidez.
David Benavidez. The big Benavidez, yeah.
Big Benavidez. So with Jay going over that history, you heard of the European Coalition of Cab Drivers. You heard about all the people at 147 that moved up to fight him that actually had names. And we would also be remiss if we, act like that didn't happen. How did Bernard Hopkins get big? He got big because he beat up some people that moved up from 147 that was good at 147, and he mauled them and bullied them at his own weight class at 160, where he was 6 feet tall and had dominated for like 20 fights in a row. So a lot of Oscar De La Hoya did it. A lot of fighters let fighters come up. I mean, Marvin Hagler, he had dominated his division, mind you, but he said he needed a bigger name. How do I get a bigger name? Fight these little guys who have a big name and dominate them. He did that when he dominated Hands of Stone. Who's my man name?
Oh, that's Roberto Duran.
Roberto Duran. When he knocked out and had one of the best 3 rounds in boxing history with Tommy the Hitman Hearns, who was tall for 147, but we already know he was Mr. Glass as well. Also trained by Manny Stewart. Manny Stewart got something with these Mr. Glass dudes. So he fought him, and he fought.
Pause. I'm gonna add another one to that list.
What's up?
Great right hand, good boxing ability, but Mr. Glass as well, Andy Lee.
Andy Lee, and he was actually a southpaw and had a good left hand, but Mr. Glass.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what's up. Herman Centron, Tommy Hearns. He liked tall cats. Jermaine Taylor, who was out robbing people in broad daylight for his own vehicle. I don't know what he was doing, stabbing people with pencils, plastic pencils and stuff. He was on some weird stuff, but he was also trained by Marion Stewart, the late great. And we may do a video on his boxing style too. So I'm just saying all this to say, yes, Alvarez took advantage of a lot of situations. But we feel like he skipped over a lot of fighters. And actually, the Charlos and Bubu Andrade may have been better than Irislan Lar. So he skipped over the second highest level of fights he could have had under Floyd Mayweather. And that could tarnish his legacy that we're about to discuss. So let's just go here with it. They say he pound for pound the top dude. Who is his competition for pound right now? Canelo.
Errol Spence.
Oh, I didn't think of that. Okay. Elaborate on that. You think Errol Spence is competition? You think Errol Spence has legitimate place or argument for number one pound for pound?
I do, with his dominance over A-level fighters, absolutely.
Okay.
I would say, now here's the thing. If Crawford had one more marquee name, then he would probably have that spot because of how he finishes people.
Right. He's finishing, but
he has a knack for finishing people in the most attractive and traditional boxing sense. And right. I think that's why people love him, and that's why I love him, because the type of torque and bad intentions that he put on hooks is something that is hard to produce coming out the South.
Especially with the langliness of his arm, because he has abnormal reach for being a 147 pounder who's about 5'8" or 5'9" in height. It's like 74 inches. I think Errol Spence, who's about 5'9.5", 5'10", is only 72. I think Floyd was 72. I think Oscar was 70 inches. And maybe Shane Mosley was close to 74. For 74-inch reach at 147 is crazy, and especially crazy if you're knocking people out with hooks, which is one of the harder punches to throw when you Langley like that. But I will not put Terrence Crawford up there because it's his recent competition. But overall, as a consensus between us or comprehensive, we're going to say his competition for pound will be Spence and Crawford. Anybody else?
Not off the top, no.
Nah, not off the top for me either. Either people had losses. I mean, Tyson Fury could be, and I know you don't like Tyson Fury. I know you don't like Tyson Fury.
But I got outside of hate, I got specific reasons on that.
Right. Only
for somebody that has multiple accusations of and I'm not even gonna go towards the glove, but just the tainted meat and steroids, you got multiple accusations. Like I can't really give that to you, especially if the only real legitimate heavyweight you fought was Deontay in the past. How many years?
Oh yeah, he didn't fight. Well, he beat Vladimir Klitschko only. Okay, I won't do it because he only fought two legitimate heavyweights, and the one heavyweight was Vladimir, who was like 40 years old. Okay, I'll take it back. He only beat Deontay Wilder. He beat Vladimir Klitschko on the way out. He's already 6'10", so he had an advantage. Okay, so he's not pound for pound. If he beat Joshua, in my head, I had that fight already completed. If he beat Joshua, I would put him on there. So yes, you're right. The only contenders for number one pound for pound in boxing right now, Canelo Alvarez at 168, who is again the WBC, WBO, and WBA super middleweight champion, going to fight a guy we like, Caleb Plant. We'll talk about that in a moment. And then we have Errol Spence, who has two belts going on third, because they're supposed to announce the fight at 147 against Yordenis Ugas, who will give him 3 belts at 147, with Crawford having the 4th, leading into a situation similar to what we had for Canelo. Same thing for Jermell Charlo. 3 belts to one person, get that, fight your 4th for the undisputed championship in a sport that needed this right now, and we got prime time. So I'll give it to Canelo, even though he's been fighting these bums, because he's going to finish it off. And I feel like you are allowed, when you fight at a high level and you finishing people like that, you're allowed to jump in there and fight some bums here and there, but you got to finish it. And Crawford, I need him to finish it. I need Spence to finish it. So, what did you think? He just had a fight recently on Cinco de Mayo weekend, May 8th, against Billy Joe Saunders, who's high on the European cab driver list, but he's not Jermell Charlo. He's not Jamal Charlo. He's not Boo Boo Andrade, although I gave him and Boo Boo Andrade a 50-50 ratio of winning the fight against each other. He's not those guys. What did you think about that fight? Or did you learn anything from that fight when Canelo fought Billy Joe?
It was definitely an interesting fight. Billy Joe was probably the sharpest that I had ever seen him. And basically that was because of the level of competition. I mean, his body was tight. He was in very good shape. The footwork was there. The counter jab was there. The interrupting Canelo's timing by beating him to the jab was there.
Right.
But the first time that had to brought to me, or no, the second time I watched it, was the elongated baiting of
you jumping a little bit.
Openings.
Jay, you jumping a little bit. Sit still for a moment. See if it catches up with you. And I'll let you know if it caught up. Maybe the movement is doing it. It probably was the movement.
So Billy Joe definitely had, the athleticism, had the know-how, but Canelo's pressure was so constant and just in your face that it forced Billy Joe to show what his openings were. And he did not adjust. He kept his head in the exact same place. Canelo capitalized on it. And the fatal flaw, and I see this with a lot of fighters that end up getting hurt, especially recently, UK fighters. It's the same injury, and it keeps happening for the exact same reason. They keep dipping to the same side and getting hit exactly in their eye socket, and it keeps shattering. From him to Dubois to what's our man Kell Brook, and I think it's somebody else.
Both eyes, yeah, both eyes. Like what
both
are you
eyes.
Doing? What are you doing?
So it's like it cannot. I would not say that it was in the water or in the calcium.
Right. It's not genetic.
It's not genetic. It's got to be in the tactic and how comfortable you are in the fire. I would rather get punched in my face straight on than dip down and lean into the punch.
Into an uppercut. And it's you guys are running into uppercuts. And it's like uppercuts are hooks. And the reason we have been giving these, goofy, I won't say paradoxical, but parody type names to these European fighters is because they have this knack and history of being built up, a certain way and then bombing on a big stage, almost like they're amateurs or that they didn't go to the amateurs. So we're like, yo, we already know this to be the case. Why are y'all fighting these dudes? And if you are fighting these dudes, like they need some insurance. They need some insurance, just not for their health, but some insurance, to take care of them for the rest of their careers, because it seems like their careers are over once they get on the big stage. Frank Bruno got up to the big stage, fought Mike Tyson and started getting blew up. Nassim Hamed, once he got beat up by Marco Antonio Barrera at I think junior lightweight or lightweight, he faded from obscurity. Junior Witter, people don't even remember Junior Witter. Junior Witter was being built up as a southpaw switch hitter. A lot of them, tend to do that. He fought Zab Judah, probably on short notice. Zab Judah got him up out of there. And Timothy Bradley beat him, and he faded into obscurity. He was supposed to have a fight with Ricky Hatton back in the day. Then you have your Amir Khans.
And to be honest, yeah. Ricky got to go on this list because the way that he faded, he went he went from a straight monster. And he went from basically being Mike Tyson at 147 to being consistently put to sleep.
Folded easier than Kleenex. They hitting him and he's just evaporating. He's just evaporating. You know what I'm saying? Like what's the movie? The Avengers joints when cats was disappearing. The great like, bro, like, yeah, he just faded once he got hit to the chin. So yeah, that's a good point. So we point that out, and I'm saying Canelo, like, you can drop down and fight lower competition as you prepare, because I think it's a good tactic, and I think that's why he's dominating a lot of these dudes. He takes these lesser fights, but he takes a similar style. Like he's about to fight Caleb Plant for the 4th belt to be undisputed at this weight class, and I think he's doing the undisputed thing for his legacy. Look, you got Mayweather to compete against. You got just the lineage of black fighters in this sport. Like I'll be honest, if I'm another race of people and I'm playing basketball, I'm playing football, I'm playing baseball, I'm boxing, and I'm trying to be the best of all time, I know I got a ladder to climb. If I'm boxing, I gotta get past Sugar Ray Leonard. I gotta get past Sugar Ray Robinson. I gotta get past Muhammad Ali. I gotta get past Floyd Mayweather. I get past Shane. I gotta get past so many people to be considered that. So I got to build my resume airtight at times. I gotta get undisputed championships at every weight class I fought at just to even be considered. So I feel like this is the right route for him to go in that direction. And mind you, the kid is 30 years old. When Floyd was 30, I think he had fought Diego Corrales. He had become someone undisputed, or he had dominated 130. He had fought Diego Corrales. He had fought Angel Man Freddy.
Yep.
Angel Man Freddy, who had a close fight with Diego Corrales, and I believe he fought some other Mexican fighter, but he had the belt. Diego Corrales was dominating everybody at the weight class and had knocked out Robert Garcia, who was the legendary trainer of his brother, Mikey Garcia, and a whole bunch of others. He had trained Margarito. He had trained, who's my guy who put all types of hands and feet on Adrian Bronner? Maidana. He trained a lot of Mexican fighters and got them to a level that you rarely see in the sport. He got knocked out, and he was trained by, I forgot what they call him, Big G. And Big G trained our guy, Fernando Vargas, for most of his career. And he was a phenomenal Mexican fighter. So they had a long line of being great trainers and great fighters. He got knocked out by Diego Corrales. There were guys in that weight class like Yoel Casamayor, Acelino Freitas, who had faded into obscurity themselves because Floyd was so big. So Floyd ran through that weight class, but he didn't fight Zab Judah, Ricky Hatton, Oscar De La Hoya, Shane Mosley, Manny Pacquiao, Miguel Cotto, most of these people on this list until after he turned 30. So for Saul Canelo Alvarez to have this type of resume at 30 does leave him a lot of room for excellence, to gain that excellence. But right now, he's only halfway to the level Floyd is, just because he has not gotten the big fights and dominated his competition in those big fights. Because how many S-level fighters has he fought? Number one, how many S-level fighters has Canelo fought?
One.
You won't give it to Triple G? Was nice at the time. Triple G was no.
I'll give him A plus.
Okay, A plus. I'll only S. Okay. Let's okay. Floyd, how many S's did he fight? He fought Ricky Hatton, he fought Canelo, and he fought Diego. They were S.
I will put Zab in there at that time.
So you talked about Carlos Baldomir, the tricky way he got it, because Zab was bugging, and he had just become, I believe, undisputed at 147 by beating Corey Spinks, but he lost to Carlos Baldomir. That dropped him down to A plus by the time, to me, he fought Mayweather. He had just lost to Carlos Baldomir. So, but as far as A pluses, Floyd fought the most A pluses of all time. He fought, I think, over 20 champions, like back to back. So he fought a lot of A plus fighters.
To piggyback on that very briefly, and this is my original point when we were having the group convo with Josh and Vontae,
right?
Mayweather has the most Hall of Famers on his list than anybody else, in my opinion, because I went down Ali's list. I went down Sugar Ray Robinson's list. I went down Sugar Ray Leonard's list, and nobody got past 15 except Floyd. Nobody,
because they want that smoke, because you might lose. You might lose not because the guy's better than you, because it's going to be fatigue, all types of things that happen. I mean, even Errol Spence when he went on his tour, just trying to run through the welterweight division, he started getting tired of training so hard every time, and he slacked off a little bit. Although he's still undefeated, and we want all the smoke when we make a video about Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford. But Canelo's halfway there, and he's about to fight Caleb Plant. When that fight gets announced, we're going to do a fight breakdown on that. We're not going to get too much about Caleb Plant and the rest of the 168-pound division. So we know his legacy is not sealed to be greatest of all time, not yet. He's trying to be on the trajectory to get on that list and compete against all these black fighters. No offense to other ethnic group. You see what's going on. You see what's going on. I'm not about to argue anybody about soccer or rugby or figure ice skating or anything of that nature. It is what it is. Whoever put in the work and gets the accolades are the people that dominate that particular sport. And we know who dominate this sport so far. So anybody else that want to get on that list, on the top of the list, you know what you got to do to get up there. No synthetics, no fakeness, not a long history. I'm not going to get into no drugs and this meat stuff, but no long history of, steroids and things of that nature, because Roy Jones and James Toney got caught up with some nonsense. So I'm not gonna, and Shane Mosley. So I'm not going to get into that. All I'm saying is don't have no long history, no enhancements to your career to make you win. You got to put in the work to get on this list. So as of right now, do we both agree that Canelo is number one pound for pound in the sport?
As of right now, yes. As of right now, yes. Now, I will say that Errol only has to have one stellar performance to eclipse him.
If he beat Udonis Ugas, he got it?
I'm talking about if he smashes Ugas, yes.
Oh, okay. They're going to fight around the same time. I mean, within the same year. If he stops Caleb Plant, if Canelo stops Caleb Plant and becomes undisputed 168, and Spence beats Ugas, will take him one away from being undisputed at 147, are you going to do that? Or is Canelo the pound for pound?
Canelo would have the edge on technicality and on skill. Because Caleb is at the very least an A-level fighter.
Right. Sexy with the hands and the feet.
Yeah.
Sweet feet.
Yeah. Like, his IQ is crazy.
Nasty. So I say whoever wins between Spence and Crawford becomes number one pound for pound. Hands down. That's the only reason Canelo on the top, because those guys have not fought. And then Canelo will only take that if he fights two of the fighters that have to prepare for him now, because he's been preventing them with his management and his negotiations from either getting other big fights. So he would have to beat a combination of two of these fighters: David Benavidez, Jermall Charlo, because Jermall Charlo is at 154, Bubul Andrade, and knock out Triple G. At this point, he has to knock out. He can't have no more close fights with Triple G. He has to knock him out because he got two or one belt 160, and he still hasn't lost since that fight. He has to knock him out. He has to beat two of them fighters, and one of them by knockout, in order to be the number one pound for pound. Since that's the conclusion we came at, and we're gonna do videos on his upcoming fights and other upcoming fights, you have anything for closing before we set out and make some more videos?
I'll say from just adding a little bit of sauce to the top with the Billy Joe Saunders fight. As far as the finish, Canelo gets credit for his meticulous stalking, but I got to take a little bit of sauce off of that, because Billy Joe could have, how can I say this? Even though his eye was crushed, we've seen people's eye crushed, and they did more than that, or try to protect themselves in a more effective way. I can't give him that, especially with him being so highly critical of other fighters in the exact same situation. This
is the European being brought up to the top who was not as good as he was made up to be. It's the same situation. It was a good fight while it lasted. You said it would be a little easier. I said he was going to get knocked out. It happened in the middle there. So he got knocked out. He did get exposed, and he will never be considered one of the top 5 people at 168, in my opinion, at this point, because of the way he went out and his ineffectiveness, even when he was landing punches against Canelo. So hype job at the, I won't say hype job at the least, exposed at the most. He was not the level that we expected to give good competition to Canelo. But with that said,
here's the thing about that before we move on. The sad thing about that is the degree of separation, because Billy Joe Saunders is an A- fighter. He's not a bad fighter. It's just that he does not have the toughness or the grit to get through those moments, and that takes that.
Also, he didn't have the feel. He didn't know how to consistently hit or do anything to Canelo. He had to just basically run half the time and wait for Canelo to get tired, and that's not what a level fight looks like. It looks like, okay, you have an advantage here, I have an advantage here. Let's work these things out until someone takes an edge, and then that person that takes the edge dominates and closes out. It was domination from the start, and the only reason Billy Joe even had a chance is it was like Canelo was like, all right, let me take my foot off the gas. I don't want to use too much energy chasing him down. Let he go get some hits in. Okay, that hurt a little bit. Let me get that hit back. You know what? Oh, I just broke his eye socket. It's over. It's over. It's over. Crowd get into it. I'm folding him. That's not A level versus S level fight. That's, yeah. Because I mean, when Floyd fought Cotto, he didn't stop Cotto. Floyd can stop cats. Let's be honest. Floyd can stop cats if you want to smoke. He came back after going to jail when he fought Robert Guerrero. Otherwise, he got stopped. He was walking down at times Canelo Alvarez at 154, and Canelo Alvarez was knocking out everybody at 154. He was going to stop Zab Judah. He stopped Ricky Hatton. You know what I'm saying? If Manny Pacquiao was as reckless as he was before he got knocked out by Juan Manuel Marquez, he would have got stopped too. So when Floyd did not stop people like Andre Berto and other fights like that, is because that fighter was good enough to last. They knew what to do. And a lot of times they got specific trainers. You know what I'm saying? When he's about to fight, like, oh, we got to change it up. We about to fight Floyd Mayweather. And the guys that couldn't hang, they got stopped. So let's be honest. The guys that get stopped by Canelo are not A fighters after the fight. If you get stopped by Canelo, you're not A. You're B now. You're B or lower. You thought you was A, you're not. Triple G is A. Jacobs is A- because he can beat everybody else except other A+ fighters. Everybody else he gonna beat. Miguel Cotto.
Go ahead. Now here's the thing though. When you said the name, it brought me back to my original measuring point.
What?
And the original measuring point, because here's the thing. I don't put Canelo in that, or even thinking about him in a trajectory of the greatest fighter of all time, because there's a category for him that is actually more important. And I think that he would think would be more important. And that is the #1 Mexican fighter of all time. As of right now, I think public consensus would say that would be Julio Cesar Chavez Sr.
Yes, sir.
But my personal opinion, if we're talking about somebody that fought real competition, fought a lesser amount of cab drivers, had legendary fights, had legendary knockouts, got a legendary trainer, got a household name, a specific style, like, and maybe I'm biased because Juan Manuel Marquez is one of my favorite fighters of all time. He's definitely my favorite Mexican fighter of all time. And as far as being impressive in those A-level, S-level moments, showing everything he needs to show to get the job done, ain't nobody better, dog. Nobody.
Okay, and we're gonna do a video. If he becomes undisputed, because he has to do that first to even be in the discussion. If he becomes undisputed, if Saul Canelo Alvarez becomes undisputed at 168 super middleweight champion of the world, if he becomes undisputed at this weight class, then we have a video about who is the best Mexican fighter of all time. We will do that. But as far as this video, we are closing out. So with that being said, hey everybody, I know we just came back, so make sure you like, subscribe, and comment so we can keep these videos going. Click on that notification bell if you want to see when we come out with new videos. And that's another one for the books, Renaissance, and we are out.